Could we have just a few moments of silent meditation, please? Amen. It's good to be here this morning. It's good to wake up in the morning and look out and see a new day come. And as we were driving up this morning, I just thought of an old song, and I hadn't thought of it for a long, long time. And maybe I should have thought of it more as we used to sing it. Have I done any good in the world today? Have I helped anyone in need? Have I cheered up the sad and made someone feel glad? If not, I have failed indeed. Has anyone's burdens been lighter today because I was willing to share? Have the sick and the weary been helped on their way? When they needed my help, was I there? Then wake up and do something more than dream of your mansions above. Doing good is a pleasure, a love beyond measure, a blessing of love. And folks, I used to like the melody, and it took a long while before I got the words through. And that's where we are right now. Without that love, we're in trouble. And we're getting into a time where without that love, we're in lots of trouble. We're getting closer and closer to the day of reckoning. And I'm not trying to scare anybody. I'm just trying to say, let's get at it. Each day, we have something to look forward to. There are days when we wonder if it's worthwhile to get out of bed. But we find it is after a while. You've never really lived until someone comes up and says thank you. And that's the key. Thank you, that you have done something for somebody. We who are here today have the opportunity of getting lots of thanks between now and the time that we call it quits. Lots of thanks, and why? Because there's going to be a lot of sickness. There's going to be a lot of unhappiness. And that's where we can fit in. That's where we'll do our job. Sure, everybody dreams of getting well and going to a doctor, but as we've been told, the time is now coming in this new Aquarian age when it won't be doctors, it'll be teachers. And that's what we're here for, to be teachers and to teach the way. We're on the skids. We're going downhill so fast as a world, physically and mentally, that sometimes we wonder if there's any chance. But there is. With a group like we have today, and the people that you teach as you go out to help others, you'll take those by the hand that are on the skids going down and take them up the path and take them into a new life, a life of happiness and health. This principle of health is a lot more than meets the eye. We have the type that get the big muscles, and they seem to be healthy. That's fine, providing we have the 5-star routine, and it isn't all just physical, because there's got to be mental. When it comes to the mental end, there's more there than meets the eye. We have today more sickness on earth that can be cleared or could be cleared if we would go more in for love, because heart attacks, and there'll be 50,000 of them between this time right now and this time tomorrow. 50,000 heart attacks in the United States alone. And every one of them comes from fear. Everyone with a heart attack gets that heart attack from fear. This is one thing that love can overdo. Cancer. Yes, 1 out of 4. We have some authorities that say 1 out of 3. And we have others that say it's now a contagious condition that will become a plague. There are others who say it's already a plague. And where does it come from? Hate. Hate. Hate brings on cancer. Hate brings on arthritis. Hate brings on many dreaded diseases. Until we find out why we are sick, let's go on and learn about love, and we'll find we'll get sick automatically if we don't do it. If we do it, we'll get well. I've told this one before, but I was quite concerned. I thought as I grew up that I loved everybody. I would get my feelings hurt, and in a few minutes I'd be happy again. And I didn't hold any grudges. Physically, I didn't hold any grudges. But then a doctor told me that I had cancer of the thyroid, and I would have to have an operation. And I knew that cancer came from hate. And how could I have hate? I just kind of love everybody. I was studying then with the group that studies Dianetics. They're under a different title now. But in the old days when Ron Hubbard was with them, I was studying. And I knew that my thyroid condition, my cancer, was from hate someplace. And I just couldn't conceive it, because I was sitting back of a banjo, or always laughing, or always talking to someone, always happy. So one day, an assistant took me, and together we went down the time track. And this individual, well accomplished in the Dianetics field, took me down to my 15th year and my 13th year, and I remembered things that I never knew I would remember. I remembered the silliest little things that were so plain, and each year I went back. And when I got back to a little over a year old, I was in the 2nd year. Hate portrayed itself, and that hate was because my blood mother and father had left me in an orphan's home. And at 14 months old, I had known that I was left alone, and they had gone away and didn't stick around. And I hated that woman. I hated her. But that hate was inside of me. It wasn't outside. It was in the depths of my soul. Then I realized that this was where my cancer had come from. And I knelt down and asked forgiveness. Though she was dead, I asked that she'd pick up the vibration and forgive me for hating her. I got well. The thyroid cleared. I was forgiven. And the hate was out of my body. And that hate can cause cancer in any part of the body if we allow it to stay. Well, that's why we're here, actually. Not because of hate, or not because of fear, not because of the psychosomatics that can do so many odd things to us, but we're here on the positive end. And the positive end is love. And how do we get love? I'll tell you, the people who don't have love, and you can look around and check with your own family, with your own relatives, with your own neighbors, and the people who don't have love, who are hating and who are nasty and who aren't fit to live with, are the constipated people. I hope that sinks through. Just do a little thinking. Just think about those supposedly really close to you that are so obnoxious, cantankerous, that you wish you could annex them. But that's where all of the hate and nastiness in the world comes from, is a human body that isn't loaded with love. And you show me a sick person that's a happy person. Show me a sick person that's full of love, and I'll show you an oddity. Why we are here to learn how to, without any effort, learn the principles of love. Learn the principles that can raise our vibration. The human body has a vibration that is precious, but it happens that this vibration can be measured in hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands if you've got the instruments finely enough calibrated to do the job. I was reading a report from some scientists who had a machine that took the vibrations in the hundreds. And they found out that when an individual had a low vibration of 150 to 200, they were people who would easily catch disease. They would just pick it up without any effort at all. But when they raised the vibration by proper living and eating properly and being happy to 300 to 400, they found out that they didn't catch every cold that came around the corner. At 500 and 600, they got to a point where they were tapping into the fourth dimensional, and they could understand the messages that were coming from higher evolved substances. And they were more happy, more satisfied people. But by the time they got to the 800, they were ready to take on fourth dimension. They were ready to go to a new type of living. This is our attainment now, is to raise the vibration of the human body. If you don't believe this can be a fact, take any individuals that are difficult. I had two interesting cases, two boys, they were brothers. One was just preteen and the other was just in his teens. In our offices in Salt Lake, I heard some scuffling coming down the hall, and a mother trying to straighten something out, and the receptionist had told these people to come on in, and so that they came, and the mother came in with her hand firmly attached to the arm of a boy on either side, and these boys were trying to get at each other to kill each other. They were just ready for mayhem, and she was using all her strength to keep them apart. She brought them in and said, "You're the last chance that we know of. We have been to every type of doctor we know. We've been to psychiatrists. We have been to mental institutions, and they say there is nothing they can do. These boys just hate each other. They despise each other. Unless we have adult supervision with them 24 hours a day, they will use a brick or a board or something against each other to try and finish off the other one." And she said, "It's making an old woman out of me." Well, I could imagine that. So I gave them the Christopher glare, and they were afraid to move for a minute or two, and they wouldn't have minded so much if they'd known I used that with my Sunday school class too. But they cooled down, and I found out what they were eating. And they were both junk eaters, and they were both heavy meat eaters. We put them on the mucusless diet. We clean out their bowels. We clean out their bloodstream. 90 days later, in the same offices, I heard some laughing and chuckling coming down the hall. And this time, these two boys were coming arm in arm. First time in their life. They had hated themselves from the time they were born, nearly. But here they were, laughing and joking, and their mother with smiles. And she said, "It's a new life." And why? Because we had changed their body function. Some of you may wonder if it can't be done another way. In my school years ago, this was, I don't know, it was in the Salt Lake area, and we had a school there, and we had naturopaths and chiropractors and dentists and different ones coming, as well as our lay students. And we had a chiropractor who wanted to learn the naturopathic and learn some of the other principles. But he was extremely dogmatic in the principle that he didn't have to waste his time with all the things we were studying, because he knew that all he had to do was make a spinal adjustment and it would do the job. I had to show him a case of multiple sclerosis that was so severe that he acknowledged that he couldn't do a thing with it. And I told him at that time it could be handled, but it had to be fed, and the individual had to be rebuilt. And that's what we're here for, is to help rebuild people on a positive note. Not try and scare things out of them, not try and make people believe that they're going to get hell and damnation if they don't snap to and eat right. We got to give it to them in a better form, which is positive. We want to live on a positive state, and this is living. The new Aquarian age that we are in is the teaching age. It isn't the commanding age, but it is the new age wherein we are going to have people coming to us and asking for help. That's when eventually those thank yous will come. We're going to have a National Health Federation convention here on the 11th in Salt Lake. And when I got the notice of it, a memory came back to me that it was just 1 year ago. I spoke at the Salt Lake Convention, as I speak at many of the others, but this is one of the first Salt Lake I'd spoken at. And after the lecture, a young lady and her husband came to me, and they had a little baby in their arms. The man was carrying the baby, and the wife spoke up and said, "You mentioned in the lecture that there are no incurable diseases. We have a baby here that was born blind, and medical science makes a statement that the baby was born without any optic nerves, and the baby would never see, and so as long as the baby was alive it would be blind. But when we heard the statement, there are no incurable diseases, she said, have you got any hope you can give us for this baby?" It was not quite to the crawling stage, just getting around a bit. but it was definitely blind. It had been pronounced by a number of medical doctors that it had no optic nerves at all and could not see. We gave the parents the recommendation of using our eye formula, the Eye Bright formula, and using the B&B tincture. And if they would use this as explained and do it regularly, they could get nothing but good results. We couldn't guarantee anything, but we would tell them this, that it could do no harm to the child at all. Just a few months back, I was in Boise, Idaho, on a series of lectures going through, and the young man that accompanied me came back stage, and he said, there's a young lady out front that insists she's got to talk to you. And I said, well, you know how I feel? And he said, yes, I told her that just before a lecture that you generally try to unwind because you just come in from the plane and you were a little on the weary side, but she insisted. So I said, all right, have her come back. And when she came back, she brought a baby of a crawling age. And she said, do you remember me, doctor? And I looked at her and I said, no, I don't. And she says, well, at least you're honest. She said, my husband and I saw you 6 months ago at the National Health Federation in Salt Lake City, and you said there were no incurable diseases. We told you about our little boy that was born blind. She said, we took your advice. And she said, this is the little boy. We now roll a ball across the room, and he crawls after it and retrieves it. Or we put little bright pieces of paper on the floor, and he goes around and picks them up. He can see. All right, 6 months. That was all it took for this child to have optic nerves restored or put into his eyes that weren't there before. And it was from the love of those parents and the desire, and from feeding the baby the proper herbal foods that redid a job that was said couldn't be done. This is a thank you. She came backstage to thank me. Well, this makes you feel kind of good to know that you helped somebody in some way. And if you can do this every day, if you look forward to that day of being an opportune time to, maybe without being pushy, to help somebody. So many people are out there waiting, and they just need to know that there's someone waiting to answer them. So many we have known over the years that have gone by that have wondered if there is a way, and finally they find that way. We have found the way, and it has taken us many years, gradually, step by step, locating a way to make a new life. This particular long period of time, and the reason it's taken me as long as it has, is because I'm a little bullheaded and I got a thick skull, and it takes some time for the good Lord to get things through to me, which could have come faster. Just like the lady I was writing about that sat by me on the plane. I was a little annoyed that she didn't keep her thoughts to herself. When I'm out traveling, I'm yakking all the time, and I get a chance to sit down and buckle up and be quiet for a little while. I want that solitude. But this little lady, she was obnoxious. We buckled up and we'd gotten off into the air. Where are you going? Toronto. I went back to reading. What you going to do? What you going back to Toronto for? I know you're a businessman, but I'm going back to lecture. Oh, what about? Diet and health. I'm an herbalist. Oh, you know, I'm interested in diet and health. So what? Oh? She said, yes, you know, 2 years ago, I had a pain, a horrible pain, in my left breast. And it got so bad I went to the family doctor. Checked me over, rushed me right over to the hospital. Severe cancer. Removed the breast. But he said, you know, you don't have to worry. We got all those little tentacles, and we got all those little feelers down in there. Got it all. Don't think you'll have any more trouble with your cancer. Wonderful. 6 months later, she had a pain in the right breast. She goes back to him. Well, he says, I guess we missed some of it. Mammalectomy, bilateral. 2 sides now. Both breasts were gone. I think we got it all this time. She went home. In less than 6 months, pains in her abdomen, pains in her pelvic area. She was sick. She went back to find out what all these pains were. Exploratory would have to be going into, but just preliminary told her that she was eaten up with cancer. They would have to go in and remove the reproductive organs, part of the bowels, and from just before going into exploratory surgery, they figured that there wasn't a lot that they could leave in there. And here was the cancer that had been cleared twice now. And here it was back, and all through her body. For 40 years now, from the podium, I have made this statement, and I will continue to make it. There can never be freedom from cancer as long as we have a dirty bloodstream. Never. And these are some of the things we're going to teach you. To clean up the body, the bowel, the bloodstream, etc., until it can be healed. Until that time comes, we are in trouble. I never realized how much that bloodstream counted on the human body. As I've gone through practice over these many years, people would come to me with blood conditions, but they'd always felt that they were the healthy ones. When they see that blood come out, it was red, so they were the great American boy or girl, but they didn't realize that maybe that blood had something in it. Troubles. While being in the Army practicing, one of the nastiest jobs I had, and I mean it was a nasty job, was lancing, tapping, and draining boils. And you won't realize how nasty it is until the pus from a few boils have hit you in the face a few times. And you'd rather have some other type of a job. But we had to go through with it. This young fellow came in. He was covered with boils. He walked like an old mother hen with the wings out because he couldn't get his arms down. He had a nest of boils under each arm. He waddled in. He couldn't walk straight because, well, guess where those boils were? I had to lance, tap, and drain those too. He had them all over his body. By the time I'd got the major part of them done, it was now working on his neck, wherein there was scar tissue on top of scar tissue upon top of scar tissue with boils coming through. Soldier, how long have you had these boils? Never been without them. Never known a day since I was a baby when I didn't have boils. Supposing I write you a prescription and guarantee that in 90 days The boils will all be gone, and you won't have any more boils as long as you live, as long as you follow the prescription. Will you do it? Doc, you're pulling my leg. Couldn't be. Said, I guarantee. All right, I'll do it. So I pulled my prescription pad out of the desk and wrote him a prescription, handed it to him. Thanks, Doc, and he headed down the hall. I said, hey, wait a minute. Before he got down very far, get back here. I said, you didn't read where that prescription was to go. He was heading down for the pharmacist. He looked at it and he says, it says mess sergeant. And I said, yeah, mess sergeant. And this is what it said. This man is to have fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, and seeds. All raw possible, balanced, pre-soaked, or low-heated. And that was the prescription. I signed it. He looked at me. He wasn't sure whether I was pixelated, all there or not. He said, okay, I'll do it. I'm game. 90 days we kept him under observation, and he had not a boil on his body in 90 days. Why? Because we changed his body function. All right. We kept him under observation as long as he was in the service and never had another boil. Now, how does this compare with the lady with the mammolectomies, with the breasts removed? What did she have? She had 2 boils. Glorified boils at 14,000 plus each is what they average. But they were from the bloodstream just like the soldier's boils were from the bloodstream. We took his system and cleaned it up and got the toxic poison out of him. The boils couldn't survive without the poisons. And that's the key. The cancers cannot survive with a clean bloodstream. And now let me tell you what the lady had to for the rest of her story. Thank you. The 2 years passed. And during that period of time, she started to feel better. And during the time, she went to her doctor and said, give me an examination. I think I'm feeling better. He examined her and said, well, that's odd. The cancer's all gone except a little showing on the pap smear. And she said, all right, I'll go back and I'll work it over. Next time she came back, it wasn't on the pap smear. Then she found she was completely healed. Completely healed. And how did she get healed? I asked her. I was the nosy one now. She wasn't bothering me at all. I was now bothering her. What did you do about it? Well, she said, when I got home, after I had been told that they were going to remove most of my organs, I sat down and I knew there was something wrong, but I didn't know what it was because I know nothing about medicine. I know nothing about foods, herbs, or anything. And she said, you know, the good Lord talked to me. He just told me I wasn't eating right. She said I had that much information. I wasn't eating right. And so she said, I changed my diet. Oh, what did you do? And she said, well, I ate fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, and seeds. As many raw as possible. And the rest were low heated or pre-soaked. Took me 40 years to get this through my thick skull. 40 years, and the Lord told her now. And I thought, gee, where's there any justice here? I'd work my tail off, and she guessed it just accidentally. Or was it? No, she asked with faith. She had enough love in her heart that she knew she was going to get an answer, and she got it. And she got a beautiful answer. One that is so simple that it would pay to listen to it. Do you know what I'm doing now? And I said, no, what are you doing now? She said, I'm traveling from city to city, traveling all over the United States and Canada, because there are groups of women that either fear that they've got cancer or are afraid they're going to get it, and they want to know what I did to clear up my cancer. And I'm telling them about using fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, and seeds. That's as simple and plain as anybody could ask. This is the program that I think the good Lord likes. And the reason He likes it is because it's simple. The reason I like it, I'm not too smart. I'm simple. And I think it's great. Well, there is the key. Fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, and seeds. If we start right now and we're ready for it. But are we ready? She was. Because she cut herself right down and went to work on it. But are we ready? Sometimes we have to have a little bit of help. And that's where our programs fit in. Sure, we've got the advice now. We know what to do. We give the advice when we say fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, and seeds. That's the oldest advice that's been given to mankind. Each of you need transportation. You may need a cheap car or an expensive car. You may get a Volkswagen or you may get a Rolls Royce. But whatever you get, you're absolutely stupid if you don't ask for the instruction manual. That instruction manual will tell you the type of fuel to use, the SE oil to use. It'll tell you how to take care of it inside and outside, so that car will operate smoothly over a long period of time, so that not only you're happy with it, but the people who sold it to you will have lots of recommendations coming in, because you got a car that's lasted a long while. So you've got to have an instruction manual. Where do we get ours? We have an instruction manual. We don't have an automobile, but we have a vehicle. And this vehicle is more accurately built and a better piece of equipment by far than anything else is on earth today. This vehicle is built to last 1,000 years. Did you get that? 1,000 years. This vehicle is completely computerized. It is so well built that it can operate on its own. It was given half a chance. It is equipped with a brain that it would take 15 or 16 rooms this size to hold enough computer equipment to do what one brain can do. That's how great that brain is. And that's all equipped in this vehicle. If you don't believe this is good, every little bit of it's good. It has a built-in plumbing system. And that plumbing system is so delicate that you can take the circular or the system running through the very small lines that carry the liquid and pinch them in two with your fingernails. So that's soft and that delicate. And yet, do you know by the time a person reaches 70 years of age and has drank as much water as they should or as much liquid, enough to run through 3 large railroad tank cars. And that's a lot of water. Hundreds of thousands of gallons go through this body. And those little delicate tubes are just as good, if the body's been taken care of, at 1,000 years as they were when they were first put in. We have on the front of the face here, each of us, a nose, the nostril. And they're all about the same length, about 2 inches, give or take nationality. And we don't think much about it. It's just something to breathe through. If some of you had gone on some of my house calls in some of the cities where I've been, Great Falls, where it got bitterly cold, or in Evanston, Wyoming, where it got 40, 45, 50 below zero, and you'd gone out on a house call with me, and you took a great big deep breath of that icy cold air through the mouth, you could fall over dead because the lungs could be frozen now, that quickly, because they can't accommodate that cold temperature. But you breathe through the nose, 2 inches, that quickly you take a deep breath through the nose, and it changes from 45 below zero, right there at the bottom of the nose, to 98.6 at the top of the nose. 45 below to 98.6 above. That quickly. And it's perfect for you to breathe. Or if you're going to a burning building, 500 degrees. Through the mouth, you burn that lung out. Burn it right out. That's where so many people die. But if they breathe through the nose, and at 2 inches, it is changed from 500 above to 98.6. That quickly. If you don't think deity is connected with this, or if you think you're smart enough you can build a nose that good, you write deity under your name. We have got superior beings. I have worked with atheists who say, yeah, I just happened. Holy cow. They just happen to be nuts. Here we have got an entire body that is so beautifully built and so delicate and so intricate and so marvelous. Why shouldn't we follow the instruction manual for the vehicle? And where is our instruction manual? It's the scriptures, you bet. The old scriptures and the new scriptures. And when anybody speaketh from the Lord, and you know that's where it comes from, that's some of the newest of the new scriptures. We've lost a lot of ours. As you know, the Bible isn't what it originally was. But we used to have the book of herbs. And the book of herbs was one of the greats in the Bible. We miss it. One day it will be established again. But in our latter-day scriptures, we're given these instructions and some of the information that was lost in the book of herbs. And one of the things that we have got to stop and think about is the fact that it tells us the very types of foods that we eat and where we're going to get them. Let's go to Genesis chapter 1, 29 and 30. It says, and the Lord's speaking now. He's the one that built this vehicle. If we had trouble with our Ford car, and we lived next door to Henry, we'd go over to Henry and say, hey, this fool thing isn't working right. No, I can fix that in a hurry. I built it. I know how to fix it up. All right, the good Lord built this. And so, he tells us now how to keep it in good condition. And in Genesis, he says, I give you all green seed-bearing herbs, to be used as meat for man. Meat is fuel. Meat for man and meat for the beasts of the fields. He even goes way back when the lamb will lie down with the lion part. But he tells us the whole thing. It's right there for us. And what are seed-bearing herbs? The herb, actually, as you'll be learning in the classes that we have, ranges from the smallest microscopic herb that is hard to detect to the largest mustard tree or sequoia tree. These are all seed-bearing. And many of these seeds look so much alike that it's hard to tell what type of plant it is. The seed from the mustard tree is a tiny little seed, extremely small. And yet the mustard seed grows, develops into the largest tree known on earth today. The mustard tree is an ancient from the Asian area, and it's one of the largest trees. But it all comes from the seed. And what comes around the seed? Something to nourish it, something to take care of it and sustain it. And so around each one is the fruit, the vegetable, the grain, the nut, or the seed. And that'll also nourish or sustain us. And it's there for us to use. The herbs are divided down the middle. On this side we have the nutritional herbs. On this side we have the medicinal herbs. Ezekiel tells us of this. Ezekiel 47:12 says, "And the fruit of the tree shall be for meat, and the leaf thereof for medicine." He's trying to tell us that if we eat the fruits, we can live 1,000 years. And if we don't, some herb doctor had to mix up a batch of leaves, straighten us out. And this is the truth. It works just this way. The fruit of the tree itself will sustain us, providing, now catch this, that we eat the fruit properly. That's one of the keys in the new scriptures that was in the herb book, Book of Herbs. Every herb in its wholesome state. Get that word, wholesome. One of the most terrific words that's ever been put in the English language. Wholesome. When you look it up in Webster's Unabridged, it says wholesome means with the life therein, as in its original state. With the life therein. All right. How are we going to get long life? By eating live food. And live food is the key of keys. And live food is why we're here to learn how to get long life. When I say 1,000 years, you think I'm doing it tongue-in-cheek, I know. But I'm not. From the time of Adam down to Noah, men lived 800, 900. Methuselah, 969 years. Right up to that 1,000-year mark. And what did they eat? From the time of Adam down to Noah, there was no history of meat eating. There was no history whatsoever. And if you don't believe in the scriptures, if you happen to be atheistic, get a historian. Get Josephus. And if you read Josephus, you'll find he isn't as scriptural as many of the other readings. He's kind of a hard-headed historian. And he will tell you that same story from Adam down to Noah. There is no history of meat eating. And the history of meat eating started at the time that the flood had washed the ark over to Mount Ararat. And after they had been living there for the 40 days, the ark landed on Mount Ararat, and when it landed in a sterile area, sea-washed, no vegetation. Now, in our own Latter-day Scripture, I happen to be a Mormon, and it says there very plainly, meat is to be used during times of, get this, cold, winter, and famine. Now, it wasn't cold or it wasn't winter, but it was famine. They had no vegetation. They had to eat meat. Well, the Lord wrote the book in the first place, and so when the time for the plague comes out, which it was now with Noah there and his group, he had warned them to put 2 of the unclean animals on board ship, but to put 7 of the clean. And why 7 of the clean? Because the good Lord knew that they were going to land in the sterile area, and they would have to turn to meat to eat. And so they did. And they had the 7 of the clean. They started to work on them. And they enjoyed it. And in 3 generations, they got to a point where they were heavy meat eaters. Now you see, this is an interesting thing. Something happens to you when you start eating a certain type of materials of this type. Anything that is a strong drink or a strong food, that is habit forming. Anything that is strong. Well, meat happens to be a strong food, as is bread is a strong food. There are men who have killed other men to get a loaf of bread when they could have gotten something else, but they wanted bread. This particular principle now of strong food, they started eating the meats, they enjoyed it. And then they got to a point where, now this is a technical term, you'll have to check it out and look it up, but they got hooked. And when they got hooked, they had a hard time getting off, and that's why you and I still have a little meat, potato, and gravy running in our veins. It carried on down. And with red meat comes death. And this is one thing that we'll be giving to you straight. And there is plenty to back us up. Red meat is death itself. Up until the time of Noah, they could live up to 1,000 years. But in 3 generations, get that, in 3 generations, they dropped from 1,000 years to 120 was the lifespan. In 3 generations. Well, where does that fit us? They're dead and gone. Why worry about it? It tells us, though, in that same manual that we have started to use, or should use, for an instruction manual, it tells us that there's going to be another time when man will live 1,000 years. It's not today. I've had a rough time making my 10. We got her. But the principle that we're working on right now is the fact that we are told that if we live right, that man will live the age of a tree. A child will live 1,000 years. The lamb will lie down with the lion, the bear with the ox. The child will play at the cockatrice's den without being poisoned. And why? Because there will be no hate, there will be no poison, there will be nothing but love on the entire face of the earth. Love. And where will the love come? Not from constipation. We're going to get that word in once in a while because it's rather important. When you figure that 90% of all disease on the face of this earth stems from a lousy bowel. A bowel that is congested. 90%. All right, the lamb will lie down with the lion, and it says there'll be no, get this, there'll be no sickness. There'll be no death. If there be no sickness, I won't make the grade. All right. There will be no sickness. Why? Because we'll all be healthy. Well, what are we worrying about? That's not until the year 2000. That's a long ways off, 2000. Or is it? It's 1980 right now. That leaves us 20 years. 20 years. That's why we're with the Aquarian Age. We're the forerunners. We've got to warn and forewarn. We have got approximately, give or take, 20 years to do something about it, because at the end of 20 years from now, there will be one, statisticians say, 1 out of 10 still alive. 1 out of 10. The remainder won't make the grade. And the reason you won't make the grade? Because there will be wars and rumors of wars. There will be earthquakes and tidal waves. Those who live properly, whose bodies are clean, who are on a high vibration, will be prompted and told where to move and how to go and where to finish off at, so they'll be safe. Yes. But those who live properly will be able to go out, as you, I hope every one of you will be able to go out among those that are on the skids going downhill rapidly during the plagues. And this is one of the times when we are looking toward, in 20 years, plagues that'll make the last one look like child's play. The last great plague that we had was influenza in 1918. 2 million people in the United States died of it. 20 million people on the face of the earth were wiped out. And that will be so insignificant, because this goes back to the history of Joseph in Israel. Goes back to that 7-year time when there was death in every household. Black crepe hanging on the doors. And that's what it'll be here and in every country from border to border. Death. And death will be rampant. And there'll be black crepe hanging. But it'll only be in certain cases. If you have lived the law, if you are following the program as is taught now properly, you will have no fear. Because what is it that will get the other 9 people? Germs. They'll die of disease germs. And how about you? No respectable disease germ will stay around you. No, they go next door to live. You can make the grade. And this isn't easy. And this isn't done overnight. But it's there for us to do. I took very good care of myself while I was in the service. And though I saw many thousands of sick people, there wasn't a day but what every type of disease you could imagine was coming to me. I never got a sniffle. I never had any problems during the entire time I was in. Why? Because I kept my body in a perfect condition. A condition that we'll be teaching you about, wherein germs won't live around. This is the key. This is that 1,000 years when there will be peace and happiness and harmony, and where there will be no hate. And there will be no hate because we'll have healthy people. That's what our education here today is for. To see that we can not only help ourselves but many more. Down through life, there's only one thing that we can do that's beneficial, actually, and that is to help other people. And when they say thank you, it might be just with a look in the eye. It just might be a thank you. Or it might be that they, deep down inside, are so grateful. They know that you helped them. So that's where we are now on the helping end. And you don't have to worry. Being on the helping end, it's not going to be that expensive to you, because the good Lord will see that funds will come to you to help others. The human body has got to be cleaned, and cleaned perfectly, if we will attain that high vibration. I have been at 3 different conventions: Anaheim, Seattle, and a third one wherein these conventions were for people who believed in unidentified flying objects. And I was one of the main speakers. Yes. But they asked me to speak, not because of flying saucers or I believed in them, which I do, but they asked me to speak because they wanted to know how that people could raise their vibration of their bodies so that when the crucial time came, and many who believe in unidentified flying objects definitely believe that when the cloud comes over, it'll be a cloud of saucers. But each of them will have the power through their equipment to elevate people. Yes, judged by the Lord? We're judging ourselves, really, because with a weak body, we will not be accepted. Well, this is why I was asked to go to these unidentified flying objects conventions, was to teach people these very principles of renewing the body and making it whole and getting it to a point where the computerization would pick up those highly evolved individuals and save them, where the righteous will be gathered into a cloud and the wicked will burn as stubble. This is going to be an interesting time. I think we're the luckiest people in the world. Absolutely. To be able to be here at one of these closing scenes. And this is it. So now, our procedure from this point on is to learn how we are going to make this body a little bit more respectable. How we're going to make it so that we can pull through. I was extremely blessed, more so than most of you. The Lord was kind to me. He saw that my condition when I was born was steered through a certain channel. Now, we read in the scriptures about sins of the parents to the 3rd and 4th generation. Sins of the parents, now these can be sins of omission, or they can be sins of commission. Now the sins of omission, Nellie up the street or John down the street, they let their kids eat all kinds of garbage. And their kids are healthy. So why can't we let ours eat garbage too? Junk foods. Yeah, why not? All right, they got us snowed under. We kind of believe it. Sins of omission. Yes, we have lost our sense of knowledge there. So this is a sin of omission. We've omitted doing the proper things. But the sins of commission, we know very well that we've hit that bottle too hard. Our heart's going out on us, and our child's heart would be weaker and weaker. If we smoke too heavy, whatever we do is not right. That's a sin of commission. And if we know better and we don't do anything about it, that sin will be on our shoulder. That's why it's a commission sin. This sin of omission and sin of commission is one that goes down to the 3rd and 4th generation, you remember. Why the 3rd and 4th? Because, look around, those who are in a line whose parents have had heart trouble and grandparents have had it, and grandparents and great-grandparents, go back to the 3rd generation, and the person who has carried that heart condition through 3 generations is a pretty weak soul. They can't make the 4th. It might be the liver, it might be the spleen, it might be something else. But whatever it is, folks, By the fourth generation, it's either stillbirth or a few days in death. They can't go past the third or fourth generation. And we in the world today are on the skids. We're at the third and fourth generation. Why didn't the Lord say the fifth or sixth? We couldn't make the grade. We couldn't get to the fifth or sixth. That's how severe it is. So that's where we are now. But each time we come down, we know we made mistakes, as I have made mistakes, as you have made mistakes. And the next time around, we want to live so that we can overcome these mistakes. And so how do we get here? Don't blame your parents because you had a bad heart. Don't blame your parents because when you were born, you got diabetes. Don't blame them. Blame yourself because you knew that you had to come down through that line of the inherent weaknesses to get the type body you have got. We're not all born with perfect bodies. Far from it. Far from it. I was blessed to be born through parents who handed me a package of rheumatoid arthritis. And that package was such that for 70 years I have suffered with it. And I'm in my 10th anniversary of my 7-year cycles. Every 7 days, 7 weeks, 7 months, 7 years. You go through these cycles where for 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, you accumulate toxic poison and you dump on the 7th. I'm on my 10th anniversary. And I am dumping for the year. Holy cow. I asked for it. I asked for it. I don't want any sympathy. Just want some ridicule. Why don't you snap out of it? Come a little closer. This body that I have was crippled when I was born. I've spent 7 years in wheelchairs, 9 months, a year, 14 months at a time. I've been on canes and crutches. And I praise the Lord that in my 10th anniversary now, sure I might be sniffling around, but I'm still able to get around, and I'm grateful for it. Medical science said I wouldn't live past my 40th year. I couldn't make it. I had cancer. I refused to have it removed. Removed. Lance tapped and drained. I had a broken back, and I wouldn't allow them to fuse it. I had many other things wrong with me. I wouldn't let them take the thyroid out. I wouldn't let them do a lot of things. And so they said I couldn't live past my 40th year. One of those 4 eminent physicians, bless their souls, they went their way and followed their instruction manuals. And I learned about another way to go. The way the Lord opened up. That's when I wrote the little booklet, Just What is the Word of Wisdom? Right, it came to me at that time. And from this, 3 of those doctors are dead. The 4th one's on the skids. And I am doing 100 to 120 cities a year. And I love every minute of it. And the reason? I've been blessed. I have been blessed that I was so sickly and have been so sickly all my life. With every type, you name it. I'm just grateful the Lord was kind enough not to give me the diseases you ladies have. That added on, I couldn't have made the grade. I'm glad that I came through the channel I did. All right, so this whole thing is to give us a lesson and teach us. I have been taught this way, and in teaching, I pray that I can pass it on. And so that we won't have our sins of commission and sins of omission. We are talking on the principle of preparing the body so that it can have long life. I'm going into a principle now that is understood by many, and it's time that it's understood by more. And that is the power of the human body operating on electricity. The human body, surely we have to eat, we have to do a lot of things to keep it going, but it is powered by an electrical energy. 35 years ago, I was teaching this, that sure, we have to use certain foods and certain herbs and different things, but unless the body was kept clean, the electrical energy would not do the job that it was supposed to do. Well, I was quite highly ridiculed by an electrical engineer who told me that the thing was a fallacy. And I said, I don't care how you feel about it, I know it's the truth. Just before he died, not too long ago, he notified me that he wanted to talk to me. He said, we haven't seen each other for years, but he said, if you could come down to my laboratory, I'd be glad to spend some time with you if you can spare it. I will come, and I did. He said, you taught the principle years ago that the body operates on electrical energy. And he said, I ridiculed it. But he said, since that time, he said, we have equipment finely enough calibrated that we can measure the number of amps or ohms that go into any specific organ of the body. And if we find that the liver or the heart or the kidneys are not using as many ohms or amps as they should, that they are in malfunction. And we have used it just the opposite of what you have said. We are now finding this is a diagnostic equipment. And he said, I wish to apologize. He said, because you were right from the very beginning. Now, this man was the one who invented the bouncing bomb. He was the one that transferred the German death ray during World War II to a life ray by reversing it. He did a lot of amazing things, but he was close to death before he finally found that we were accurate. And here is the principle. The atmosphere around us is a little congested here, but nevertheless, we have the universal power here. Prana, call it what you wish. It is over the entire atmosphere. Oftentimes you'll notice a small infant or a small child will be playing with another one that you can't see, but they will be talking back and forth, and you think that you have a pixelated biological reproduction. It isn't that way at all. When born, we have a small opening in the top of the head, a soft spot. You know, you don't go punching that. That soft spot finally grows in. But that is the opening for letting the prana, or the universal power, come into the body through this, which is the opening to the third eye. As the power comes in, it goes on into the brain, down the spine, and hits the chakras and covers the entire body with electrical energy. As the child grows, the soft spot becomes hardened, and yet the pattern is left there, and it is an open door, and it can get the energy it needs through this area. But through improper living, we close that door. And that door is open with all of us if we'll learn how to use it. This particular opening must be kept clean and clear. If it isn't, we are in trouble. We get the energy from the atmosphere, and there's plenty for all of us. There's enough for everybody. And all we have to do is accept it. And it comes through the spine, through the chakras, but it has to be, and this is the important part, grounded out. If it is grounded out properly, we're fortunate, because now we have a steady stream of electrical energy coming through the body, feeding it with electrical power and out through the ground. Do you know, it hasn't been too long since the Japanese had outlawed rubber-soled shoes for their children, and this was an illegal thing to put rubber-soled shoes on Japanese children because they knew of this electrical flow. It is so important. We should have our shoes and stockings off and going barefooted in either the lawn or in soil or sand or something every day. This makes the contact far better if we will keep it going clear. People have come to me with insomnia so many times. I have had so many patients of all ages. They walk the floor all night, they can't sleep, afraid they're having to go to the asylum. I remember one old gent down in southern Utah. He was up around 80 years of age, and he had walked the floor every night, month in and month out. It wasn't only hard on him, but he was irritating the whole family. They'd be kept awake with him walking the floor. His son had heard one of my lectures and had passed the word on to the old gent. And the old fellow wouldn't do it for some time. So one night he was so beside himself, he said, "All right, I'll do it. Can I just take my shoes off and go in my stocking feet on the floor here?" And the son said, "Dad, if you're going, let's go." He took him by the hand and took him outside, took off his shoes and stockings, and he walked him around the lawn there for about 10 minutes. And the old gent hadn't slept for so many months, except snooze for 15, 20 minutes, and then wake back up again, walk the floor. The next morning, they had to awaken the old gentleman. He had slept all night long like a baby, and they had to get him to wake up. And we've had so many of these cases because when we get static electricity in our body, it loads in, and the prana or intestinal or universal juice cannot go through, and so it gets stopped. Here we have got the entire principle of cleanliness once more. When we look into the iris of the eye at 12 o'clock, if you have a black line at 12 o'clock, the animation lifeline is in malfunction. Now, and looking into your eyes, you see I'd have to have a light and a glass and 35. I mean, I've got to have a light and a glass. All right. I tell you, iridology is one of the important things to learn. But when it is 12 o'clock dark, it means that someone has to wake you up in the morning. Someone has to get you moving, or you just stay home, won't even get to work, won't do anything. But here is one of the important things, is to get the static electricity out of the body and don't let it foul up. When we get too much static electricity in, we also help keep the mental institutions active. We put more people to work. This is a principle that has now has been getting wider and wider coverage. And I was so pleased within the last couple of weeks to get this report from Japan that they will not legally allow a Japanese child to go in rubber-soled shoes. Be sure that if you're walking, you have a leather sole, you have moccasins, or you have some fibrous material. Do not use nylon. Do not use any man-made synthetics, because you cannot get the electricity out of the body with this. We have to now think about the entire body, because it isn't only through the seeing eye area that this electrical energy comes. It will also come through the skin. Through the skin, which is our second set of lungs, really. 60% of all oxygen that goes into the human body is from the chin down. 60%. And so we have to start thinking about keeping the body clean. If the body becomes grimy, loaded with oils, it can't breathe, if the skin is dirty, if it has not been taken care of properly, you're not going to be able to breathe through that skin. Skin brushing is extremely important, but that skin brushing must not be done with a nylon brush. It must be done with a fibrous brush of natural fiber or bristle or something of this type. If the skin is brushed thoroughly, it will accentuate the electrical energy and the breathing possibilities. As we perspire, the skin gets, the pores get filled up and clogged, and we've got to keep a clean body. That's why we should have a bath every day we live, a hot and a cold one. A hot one to loosen up the accumulated mucus and the filth that's in the body, and then a cold one to close the pores. There are certain types of fibers that we should not wear. The type we should wear, as many of you know, is cotton, wool, linen, and silk. Silk is superior. It's the greatest of all. It comes from life itself, from the silkworm, who uses live material, which is the mulberry, to make the silk. Live mulberry. And so silk is the most perfect one for breathing, and it is the most perfect one for long life. It is great. Your wools, your cottons, your fibers from animals, but never use man-made synthetics. Never use nylons, aquilons, and things of this type. They do not breathe. What really bothers me is when I see some of the sleeping bags that are made up of synthetics, and the individual is hemmed right in. You know, you can take any individual and put them into tights, nylon tights, from the neck down over the whole body, hands, feet, and the whole system. That individual will not live past 90 days maximum. I don't care how healthy they are today. It's like the little lady in Goldfinger. They painted her body gold. She died. And that's what's happening when you're wearing synthetics. Now, if you've got synthetics on, don't take them off right now. But do a little bit of thinking about it. We have got ministering angels and we've got destroying angels. And the ministering angels are the ones that go in and do it right. And the destroying angels are the ones that go into the sick room and put beautiful synthetic bedding over them, and beautiful synthetic night clothes, and beautiful synthetic death. Just think of this for a little bit. We have today more and more cotton and silk and wool coming on the market, and I'm so grateful for this. Do you know, I remember the days when we would have to travel to many stores to find me a cotton shirt. They were all synthetic or a blend. But today there's more and more cotton shirts. In fact, I used to go down to the Veterans of Foreign Wars and the disabled veterans and the Mormons and the Catholics. I went to any of them to get my white shirts. I'd find the right size and find one that wasn't too badly worn, and I would take it to my shirt laundry, get it cleaned up, and I'd be back in shirts again with cotton shirts. Well, we've overcome this. I watch my underwear that is cotton and my hosiery that is wool, and my suits. Well, of course, I have my own tailor. His name is J.C. Penny. He has a good variety, but they're all wool. I can always get plenty of wool there, and it helps. But if you wear these natural fibers, you'll find that life will be a lot better. It'll be so much nicer. This is one of the most important things I can tell you, is watch the flow of electrical energy into your body. When you have synthetics and nylons on, you're cutting off over 60% from the body itself and stifling that which is in the body and can't get back out again. So the whole picture is such that this is one of the cleanest parts of the body, the system to carry the electrical energy that we've got to keep clean. The next thing is we have got to keep exercise. Now, there are many ways to exercise, but no one is exercising properly if they exercise past time of fatigue. And that's the whole key. As long as you stop at the time of exhaustion or fatigue and rest, the key is there. You got it. I have watched, I remember in high school, I ran, and when I got tired, I was pooped, and I quit. Well, I was so dumb, I was smart. One of the fellows that was with me, he was going to run, and he kept running until he dropped. And it took him weeks to get him out of the hospital. He had overdone. So don't overdo. So exercise is extremely important. Of course, I boast anyhow that I always have a regular exercise I do, and that is 100 push-ups a day, and it's a 200-pound push-up. Yes, that's me. I get out of the chair 100 times a day. But actually, we have a little bouncer. The kids bought me one. It's so big around, and every day I'm home, I'm on that bouncer, and that's one of the greatest exercises that I can get. But you've got to have exercise. Walking, getting around and breathing deep, all these things are so important. We are now going into a little bit about diet. This part is extremely important because this is what kept them alive for 1,000 years. We've got to tap into this now. Fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, and seeds. And how to get them, how explicit must we be on just how we use them. I was down at a health restaurant down in Winslow, Arizona, I believe was the name of the place. It was one of the best restaurants I've ever been in. But I certainly didn't go in, because on the wall just before we went into dinner was a chart, and it said, this is the way food should be eaten. Don't mix these foods with these over here, and by no means allow these and these foods to be combined. It's all right to mix some of these and these over here. Well, I was now ready to get my attorney from Pittsburgh in to help me. I was getting so confused. I didn't know whether I should go and eat anything. I was afraid I'd kill myself from that chart. we make things so complicated. We make things to a point that we lose all desire to eat. We lose the fun of eating. Well, I learned a lesson, which I think is so important, a number of years ago. After I had left my lecture in Denver, I flew on over to a couple of other cities, and then I was lined up in Albany, New York. Well, it gave me a couple of weeks before I hit Albany, but when I got there, I was approached at the airport by a staff that had come to meet me of ladies, and each of them had a great big yellow badge about so big around on, and in black it said, "Ask any gorilla." Well, now they had picked this up at my lecture in Denver, and so they had these badges printed up special, "Ask any gorilla." Well, the principle is this, and the principle that I've taught for years. Sure, the gorillas may not be quite as smart as we are, because they don't go to school. But in other ways, I think they're a lot smarter than we are, because they don't go to school. The gorilla does what it says in the first place. We're supposed to eat under our own fig tree. In other words, under your own fig tree. That means any areas where you're living. An apricot or an apple or a peach tree. It's figuratively speaking. But under your own fig tree. And the gorilla lives under his own fig tree in that area. And he browses around and eats what he wants to eat. But what does he eat? Fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, and seeds. They are as close to a vegetarian as you can ask for. They live to be 150 to 200 years of age. Even when they're sickly and on their last days, and it's generally from accident when they die, I don't think there's anybody in here husky enough to take on a gorilla. I really don't. 2 falls out of 3. and I think I'd be on the small end before the first fall. But that gorilla is husky at 150 to 200 years. And you say, well, if he eats fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, and seeds, where does he get his protein? He can't do it. He can't? Well, he does. And if you don't believe he has plenty of protein and calcium and other things in his body, check any gorilla at 150 years of age, and they have their own hair and they have their own teeth. Can you beat that? They are healthy. Why? Because I feel very strongly that this is the animal that the good Lord left around for us to have ridicule us. Because they are living like they live from Adam down to Noah on fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, and seeds and do all right. They're just not quite as smart. Now, the only way you can tell a difference between the organs of a human and the organs of a gorilla, if they're lying here, you could pass, everyone in this room would pass by and it'd be hard to tell which one was which. Some smart cookie would say, well, this one looks healthy than the other one, that must be the gorilla. All right. The other one might say, well, this one has a little larger brain. That's that was well put, but it works the other way around. We've got the larger brain, but we don't use it. Now, every organ in the human body and every organ in the gorilla is identical, except some are smaller, some are larger. Now, the brain is smaller in the gorilla, but that has been a great blessing to it because it can't read and it can't get some of the negative things that we get in our reading. So outside of that, I think let's eat fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, and seeds in their wholesome state. I mentioned that word before. I'm going to mention it over and over, wholesome. Let me just give you an example of what I mean by wholesome. We are told not to use sassafras bark tea. Sassafras bark tea is high in safrals and it's dangerous to the human body. Saffron itself will kill an individual. My parents, the people that adopted me, were Hoosiers from Indiana and Ohio. And they had me grow up on sassafras bark tea as a blood purifier. And it didn't kill me. And the reason it didn't kill me, my parents weren't that intellectual. They didn't know enough to be able to take the saffron out of the sassafras bark. If they'd taken the saffron out and given it to me straight, I wouldn't be alive today. But they weren't that smart, but they gave me the whole tea. Now here is the principle. Saffron is one of our trace minerals, extremely valuable. It'll clean that heart, the arteries, the veins, cuts the cholesterol, gives elasticity. This is terrific. Saffron is so important. When it's used alone, it's vicious. When it's used alone, it'll kill you. But in its wholesome state, and this is where that word wholesome comes in. In its wholesome state, it has with it the other trace minerals, vitamins, etc., that's in the sassafras bark. And all of them together with the saffron, the balance of them acts as a catalyst. And that catalyst makes the saffron do its job so that it's innocent as water, but the most perfect aid that you could ever give for the heart, arteries, and veins. That must be in its wholesome state. This is where the FDA, bless their souls, missed the boat. They isolated. They have isolated many of these, but one of them that we have isolated ourselves as scientists is cinchona, the Peruvian bark. The Aborigine, the Indians from Central and South America, they knew that if they used the tea from Peruvian bark, they would never get a fever. They'd have no problems. If they got the fever, whether it was a killing fever, a high fever, yellow fever, jungle fever, they could clear it with cinchona tea. Our laboratories wanted to get this material so that they could help people here not get the fever, or if they had the fever, get over it. They went down and picked up a lot of the Peruvian bark, brought it into the laboratories, and they decided that they did not want to advise people to have a cup of tea so many times a day. This is medieval. This is back to witchcraft again. That's silly. It's got to be in a capsule, a tablet, or a pill. So they took the Peruvian bark and started to tear it apart. And this is what's called processing. Processed foods, foods is a bad word. It doesn't go with processing, actually. But processing is what is putting the world on the skids today. Because of processing, we have a weaker world than we ever desired to have. Here we have got processing being used in the procedure of making the fever medicine. So they take out the coarse particles of the bark, and they throw this out because that's not necessary. They throw this out, and they wind up with a little white crystalline material. The white crystalline material is made pharmaceutically fine so that it can be put into capsules or tablets, and you can get it in any drugstore. Go to any pharmacy and tell them you want something to get rid of fever, and they'll sell it to you. Go in and ask for it by name. Well, they'll say, have you got a prescription for it? This particular particle from cinchona, from the Peruvian bark, this particular one can be very damaging to you. You use too much of it, you'll be deaf. Use an additional amount, it'll kill you. Anybody know the name of it?
Quinine.
Quinine, right. All right. Now, quinine has to be with a prescription. But you can take the Peruvian bark and you can drink it by the gallon, if you can hold that much. You can drink as much as you want, and all you do is get good. It can do no harm to anybody. And the reason? Your quinine is the trace mineral that will kill you, skull and crossbone. But the balance of the minerals in Peruvian bark acts as a catalyst. And it works together. And it cannot harm you in any way. All right, this is what Ezekiel would advise in the medicinal end. But let me take just one example, please. One example on the nutritional end. As we say, here are the nutritional herbs on this side. All right, this will be the grains. We have ignored the grains for years and years and years. We've gotten away from the whole wheat and the whole rye and the whole barley. Of course, we have notification on the package that it says whole wheat, whole rye, whole barley, whole blah blah. But it's a little on the sad side because it isn't whole. Our friend Dr. Kellogg would today roll over in his grave and bawl if he saw what his grandkids were putting out on the market. He put out a good whole grain at one time, the best that's been on the market that's been made up that way. But what do we do today? We take the wheat. This is the best example we can get. Take the wheat and we take the outside coat off of it, which is the bran. We discard the bran and give it to the horse, like the horse, because it's too coarse for us good folk. And we take off the next two layers, which is, that's called the shorts. And those next two layers is made into chicken feed or turkey feed. Now what have we got left? White flour. You think I'm going to ridicule it? I'm not. White flour is great. White flour is one of the finest things that we have got, folks. It's terrific. Now you take a big pot of white flour and put water in it and stir it up. And you have got a paste. You put it on that wall, put wallpaper over it, and you can't get that wallpaper off. It glues it right on, puts it right in, and it stays there. You can't get anything better than white. Well, of course, they put the 5 coal tar derivatives in there. That should make it a little better, you know. How long can you live on it? Well, that's something else. Why do we talk about paste? You know we don't drink paste, or do we? Well, we have our pastries, we have our white breads, we have our Twinkies, we have our miscellaneous things, and we have a pot to mix them in too. This is the pot, big pot. We mix it in, and that liquid makes up our starch. And that starch you can put on that wall, but we don't have any wallpaper. Well, we have something else down in there. We have some extra fecal matter. And so we put the paste on, and we put a layer of fecal matter, and another layer of paste, another layer of fecal matter. That's what causes constipation. You know, that bowel gets smaller and smaller and smaller, layer upon layer. In autopsy, a person has died, we want to see what's been wrong. We cut them open. We make an incision across the descending colon. And you hold it up and it looks like we have cut a tree trunk in two, because it's got layer after layer after layer solidified in there. This layer upon layer doesn't tell you the years, but it tells you which years were the lush ones. This is the sad part. We've allowed this to happen in our bodies generation after generation because we eat like our parents ate, and they ate like their parents ate. And we have been going downhill, weaker and weaker bowels. We've got to reverse this. And when we reverse it, we're going to strengthen them. Well, this particular principle of grains, we have got to eat them in their whole state. And if we don't, we're in trouble. Wheaties, that's supposed to be whole. There's a lot of them that are. But are they? We have a test for that. The word in the scriptures that say all wholesome herbs, that means the life therein is in the original state. We have the test for this. And this is how we test our herbs, nutritional herbs. We take our grains. We have a principle that we have taught for years, and that's pre-soaking and low heating. We pre-soak the grains as many hours as we need to, sometimes overnight, sometimes longer. Millet doesn't have to have as long as soaking, of course, as turkey red wheat. They regulate according to, and beans, of course, an extra day or two. But as we soak these up, they're pre-soaked. What this is actually doing is like the rain coming out of heaven, falling on the soil and wetting the seeds. And as they get soaked up, they come alive. The water seems to be like the water in the womb, brings new life. And as that new life comes, fine. But unless some heat comes with it, we're in trouble. I was back in Wichita, Kansas, where they'd put in their fourth planting. They got plenty of rain. So much rain and no sun that the grains rotted. They wouldn't mature. They've got to have some heat. All right, so the rains come out of heaven and then the sun comes down. And the sun brightens things up, warms it up, and it's the sun that changes the grain from a 5, which is acid, which cannot be assimilated easily by the human body, but the heat changes this to a pH 7, to 7.4. This change by heat, but it must be a mild heat, it can't be a hard heat. But that mild heat, like the sun, pre-cooking or low heating, this is what changes it. We had an interesting case. I've been teaching this for quite some time, and I remember out on Redwood Road, a fellow there raised his hand one day when we were talking about grains. And he said, hey, he said, you know, I tried that system of yours. It sounded kind of kooky, but he said, I thought I'd try it. And he said, I tried the double boiler deal. That is, he had water in the bottom one, and now in the top one he had about 1/3 grain and 2/3 water. You can regulate it. And he'd put it on. Well, he said he had soaked it all night the night before, and then he let it set, and he'd put it on for a number of hours to preheat. Well, he said when he opened it up, he said it was delicious. He said it was really very tasty. Yeah, that was good. But he said, being a bachelor, he said, I didn't want to scrape everything that was left in the pan into a dish, wash it all up, and then put it back into the pan again the next day. So he said, I just took the whole double boiler and put it in a cool place. And the next morning, he said, I decided I'd heat up my breakfast. So he said, I swished the double boiler, and there was water in the bottom, so I turned the heat on. I went in and shaved, showered, and so forth and so on. And when he came back out, he said, my breakfast was ready. He said, I could see the steam coming up. And so he says, boy, I looked forward to it, and I raised the lid, and I looked in, and there, he said, there was green growth all over it. Sprouts had come all over this whole thing. All right, the day before, it was just soaked and such a little sprout it wasn't noticeable. But one day, and he had green growth. Well, he said, You know, he said, I believe you now. Well, of course, he had to learn the hard way. But it was good because those sprouts were still excellent to eat. Here is the key that we have got. One of the most important keys. And that is the fact that we can take wheat, barley, rye, millet, corn, any of them that we wish to, pre-soak them, low heat them. Now, I named those. Remember Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Daniel? They lived on pulse, which is lentils. Yeah, they lived on lentils and were the wisest people in all the kingdom. And yet you go back to Ezekiel 1, and he tells us to eat the lentils and the beans. Did you get that? And the beans, and he mentions beans, and the wheat and so forth. So that they're all there for us to use. All right, now you can soak any of these. You can make some of the most delicious casseroles you have ever eaten from these grains that have been popped open. These casseroles, put your other things that you're going to add to it in the low heating end of it, and they will be absolutely exotic. You can make barley puddings, you can make all kinds of things besides the casseroles. Here's the key. We make a test piece of ground. Out in the back, we dig 2 furrows. Now in the first furrow, we plant some Wheaties and some granola, a loaf of whole wheat bread. Yeah, oh yes, 7th grade by all means. A muffin or 2 and a donut. And now we fertilize them well. We can't be stingy about it. And we irrigate them. And we talk to them too. Now in the second furrow, we put in some of the cereals that were left for breakfast. Of course, they're all whole, uncracked, pre-soaked, and preheated. Now, sometimes we like to take several of those grains and mix them together. They're delicious. It's a little butter and a little honey. Boy. Well, anyhow, got some cereal left over. If you've had too much made up, plant that. Plant some casserole that's left over from lunch. Some of your beans that were left over, and your barley pudding. Plant that. All right, we got 2 rows now. And we irrigate, we fertilize, and we talk to each of these, do a nice job on it. Days go by, and that one row that has the grains and stuff we planted in, little sprouts are coming up, and everybody likes to watch things grow. Plants and kids and things. Well, there they are, they're coming up, but the other row doesn't do anything. It's just sitting there lazy. Not a thing. We think we've got to give it a little more time. We fertilize a little more, water it a little better, talk to it a little bit more. Days go by, nothing comes up. So we dig under there to find out what, and it's dead. Why is it dead? Because you can't get life from death. It was dead in the first place. It was processed food. Food. I hate that word with it. Processed merchandise. That's what it was. Processed. And it wasn't the wholesome that the Lord talks about. So what have we got now? We have got that which is good for man, which is wholesome, it's growing. And that which is dead, just do a little thinking now. What are we going to have for lunch? Well, anyhow, stay with live food. Just keep it as live as possible, and you'll have longer, better life. But if you're going to take dead food into your body, you're taking death into your body. And this is severe. If we will use your whole grains, we have got the key now that is one of the most important keys we have. Oftentimes we wonder, why is it that we have a teenager or two, and how could such a wonderful mother and father have such an obnoxious brat? as reproduction. It's almost impossible to believe. Well, it isn't their fault. We're the one that fed them. And we fed them processed merchandise. We didn't give them good food. We, in speaking at our National Health Federations and Cancer Victims and Friends and so forth, we hear this from medical doctors and naturopaths and different ones. But I remember one medical doctor made this statement at one of our conventions. He said, we have taken children that were so impossible, hyperactive, screaming individuals, and he said, we have changed them from their snack materials to 3 good meals a day. And he said, and I'm talking about fruit, vegetables, grain, nut, and seed meals. And he said within weeks, those children have changed from brats to little angels. Why? Because we are rebuilding a marvelous structure that's falling to pieces, decaying, and we're filling her back out again. And this principle, your very grains are loaded with hormones, with estrogens, with all of your Bs, your B1, B2, B6, B7, B15, all of them. B109, 118, 233. You don't know about those. Well, I don't either, but they're in there. They're all there. Every one of them, if we will leave them in their wholesome state. But when we start running down to the store and picking up some B6 or picking up some B1, processed. We say, sure, if you're in a very terrible condition and need a little of this to act to help you out while you're weaning back to the right diet again, okay. But if you get along without it, so much better. Now these, every time we recommend our mucusless diet, and that's what our fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, and seeds are. This is our mucusless diet. We add wheat germ oil. And why wheat germ oil? Because we've been so devoid of wheat germ for so long. Now the wheat germ alone will do a little good, but so often it's stale. It causes hardening of the arteries, arteriosclerosis. So we use the wheat germ oil. We will add also some cayenne. Now why the cayenne? Well, it's hot. But that isn't the only reason. We recommend a teaspoon 3 times a day. We don't advise starting off with a teaspoon. You'll learn the laws of jet propulsion if you start right off with it in a large sum. But we recommend 1/4 of a teaspoon with plenty of water. 3 days a week. I mean 6 days a week.
Can you use the raw wheat germ rather than the oil?
Use what?
The raw wheat germ, the flake wheat germ rather than the oil?
We'd rather the oils. The oil is actually the blood of the vein. Yes, back here.
Wheat germ oil's rancid most of the time.
The people who advertise this are the people who don't know what they're talking about. I'll tell you the ones that are rancid. The ones that are in bottles and the ones that are not hermetically sealed. I traveled for a while with Jack Dumont, who was the national wholesaler for wheat germ oils. And he said, Doc, what type of wheat germ oil do you use? Viobin? And I said, no. I use Rex brand. Well, he said, why didn't you use Viobin? Well, I said, it's often a little on the rancid side. And I said, I've never found one container of Rex brand that's ever been rancid. The Rex brand comes in a metal can, is hermetically sealed, and it stays fresh until it's opened. And if it's got stale after you've opened it, before it's been all used, you can tell the person not used it because because if you use the right amount, it'll come out just right. And that has, my Rex brand has traveled with me at all altitudes and at all temperatures and all over the country. I mean, but it's good.